Every cartoon family thinks that they're original. We have the loud dad, the seemingly normal mom, and the weird kids. All in all, it's a chaotic house in a dysfunctional suburb setting. But after Family Guy blew the doors off adult animation, every network wanted their own version of that chaos. Some copied it, others evolved it, meanwhile, some completely misunderstood it. And nonetheless, some accidentally made something better. So today we're exploring some of the similar attempts of the chaotic train wreck of a show we call Family Guy. Make sure to stick around to the end where it all comes together like butt cheeks. Number 6. F is for Family. Starting things off with a cartoon that on paper looks quite like the exact Family Guy clone setup, with an angry dad, stressed mom, chaotic kids, the same old household and serial family disasters. It has the same skeleton and the same domestic chaos blueprint, but the tone? Somehow it turns out to be anti-Family Guy. There are no cutaways, no surreal logic, and topping it off with no random equals funny comedy physics. What you get as a result is that everything is grounded in generational trauma, rage, repression, and quiet emotional damage. Frank Murphy isn't chaotic in a funny way where you laugh and move on. He's just painfully chaotic in a way that feels too real for it to be cartoon. He's not our expected cartoon disaster engine like Peter. Instead of that, what he brings to the table is nothing but a walking unresolved childhood wound with a temper problem. The family doesn't reset every episode, so the damage accumulates. The regular arguments do actually matter. Consequences stick, and finally, people remember what happened. This is what happens when you take the Family Guy family template and strip out the absurdity and replace it with realism, bitterness, and emotional continuity. Because F is for Family does not try to be outrageous, you definitely have the same structure, same animated family sitcom core, but instead of chaos comedy, you get generational damage therapy sessions disguised as jokes. And all it proves is that you may copy the format, but the soul of the show decides everything. Coming in at number 5 is Bob's Burgers. Next on our list is the softest twist on the formula and ironically one of the smartest evolutions of it. On the surface, the structure is familiar yet again. You have your family-centered storytelling, episodic plots, domestic chaos, and everyday disasters. The same old blueprint with the same animated family sitcom DNA, but the tone? Totally flipped. There's no cruel comedy, humiliation humor, and no shock value as a personality trait. The chaos is affectionate and not violent. The jokes don't come from tearing people apart. Instead, they come from how deeply this family cares about each other. Bob isn't a Peter Griffin archetype. He's most definitely tired, overworked, stressed, but emotionally present. Quite the surprise, I know. Linda isn't trapped or unhappy enough to end up cheating left and right. Instead, she's chaotic but always provides support. The kids aren't there for punchlines, because surprisingly they have actual personalities. And most importantly, the family actually likes each other. Yeah, definitely not what we do in Quahog. This is the result and example of what happens when you keep the family cartoon core but remove cruelty as the engine. You get bombarded with warmth, continuity, emotional safety, and humor that feels human. And just to be clear, this isn't a one is good, one is bad situation. It's not about quality, superiority, or intelligence. It's about different philosophies of comedy. One uses chaos, shock, cruelty, and absurdity as its engine. The other uses warmth, affection, and emotional familiarity. And for fans like us, Family Guy is definitely our cup of tea, but this show provides an option for the peace lovers. So at the end of the day, they're not rivals, but just parallel evolutions of the same concept. Just two completely different ways of telling the same kind of story. Coming in at number 4 is American Dad. Let's now take a look at a show that has the same creative DNA as Family Guy, because of course, the same creator. But even with the same animation language and the same structural blueprint, can this show manage to not feel like a ripoff, but like a recalibration? In American Dad, we are presented with the same suburban satire, nonsense logic, and even the cutaway rhythm. But the execution shifts from raw randomness to something more controlled. The characters don't rely on volume or shock to drive stories. They rely on consistency. Stan functions as structured chaos, and his personality creates the plot instead of derailing it. Wouldn't say the same for Peter. Roger isn't just comic relief or villain energy, but acts as the example of what happens when a copy learns control instead of chaos, because control isn't dominance. After all, Family Guy doesn't operate on structure, it runs on instability. Peter isn't a narrative engine, a better word would be a narrative accident. and Stewie is a walking war crime with a British accent. The family dynamic isn't a system, it's a demolition zone. Family Guy sets literally everything on fire and then roasts marshmallows over the wreckage. So yes, the others may look cleaner or more controlled, but rather than evolution, it's domestication. Family Guy, stripped of the reckless energy that made the original untouchable, gives you American Dad, because copying the framework is easy. But copying the madness, the fearlessness, zero morals, and zero filter chaos, yeah, that's the part nearly nobody survives. Coming in at number 3 is Bordertown. Built around 2 families, 2 cultures, and one very obvious agenda. Bordertown didn't just borrow the family cartoon structure, it also tried to reprogram it. I mean, you literally have the same household setup and episodic rhythm, but instead of chaos-driven humor, the engine was political messaging. And that's where the structure shattered, because speaking for myself, I'd rather watch Peter die in 100 ways than a political debate. The show tried to fuse cultural commentary with the family cartoon format, but the balance never stabilized, because somewhere in between, the jokes weren't dominant enough to carry the themes, and the themes weren't sharp enough to function as satire. And so it landed in the worst possible middle space. It wasn't funny enough to entertain, and not bold enough to provoke. Instead of satire, it felt like awkward instruction, and the chaos felt like controlled messaging. This just proved that the family format works when humor leads and meaning follows. But here, meaning tried to lead with the humor having to chase it, which exposed the real weakness of the structure. If the comedy isn't dominant, the whole system collapses. Bordertown didn't fail because it had something to say. It failed because it forgot how to say it in the right format. It wasn't a bad idea or a stupid concept, just the wrong engine for the message and the wrong format for the tone. Coming in at number 2 is Solar Opposites. On number 2, I introduced you to something totally different, because this one didn't copy the family cartoon structure, but chose to mutate it. The framework is still there with the household unit, shared living space, and recurring domestic conflicts. But instead of an urban setting and middle-class dysfunction, everything is filtered through sci-fi logic and alien psychology. So all remains the same, but with different species. The house isn't a home, it's a lab. But the good thing might just be the fact that it doesn't try to mirror human dysfunction and instead uses non-human characters to interpret it in their own way. Structurally, it feels like the family format running on high intelligent pacing with faster dialogue, denser jokes, and tighter setups. The episode is chaotic nonetheless, but it's engineered instead of impulsive and calculated, not sloppy. And that's what marks our key difference. The family format becomes a container for sci-fi chaos instead of domestic dysfunction. The chaos comes from alien logic and not human stupidity. And this is what copying looks like when it evolves instead of imitating something mindlessly. And finally coming in at number 1 is The Cleveland Show. Well, for our final show, we have something that is neither an inspiration nor an evolution. It's just basic franchising, a literal character export. They use the same animation style, joke mechanics, and cutaway rhythm. And yes, even the same neighborhood gag ecosystem. Fox didn't create a new show, they repackaged a formula. Everything was the same, and yet it failed miserably. But the problem wasn't the structure, it was the engine. Peter works because he's chaotic, unpredictable, and even explosive. But Cleveland isn't. He's passive, polite, and overall has low conflict energy. And absurdity needs friction to survive. Comedy like this only works when chaos has something to bounce off. It could be a volatile personality that destabilizes scenes, disrupts logic, and breaks tone on impact. Without that, the jokes just float. There's no collision, pressure, or ignition. So instead of controlled chaos, you get polite absurdity. You expect narrative violence and end up with safe randomness. As a result, this wasn't just a spin-off anymore. It seemed more like a brand extension experiment. A corporate attempt to bottle the same thing twice and sell it again slapped with a different label. And that's why it collapsed fast. Because copying the format without copying the chaotic personality engine doesn't create a new show. What you end up creating is a hollow shell that looks familiar but feels empty. So if all these shows prove one thing, it's that you can copy the animation, the structure, and even the humor style, but you can't copy chaos chemistry. As a result, some shows ended up mutating or softening it, and some just broke under the weight of trying to recreate it. But what do you think? Was Family Guy actually the blueprint, or was it just the most successful accident in adult animation history? And if you want to see what pure chaos looks like when it's not a cartoon formula, but a character personality, go watch our last video on how long would Stewie Griffin's prison sentence be.